There is a moment in a relationship when something changes, not when she tells you she is leaving, not when she blocks your number, not even when she starts dating someone else. The real change happens when she realizes that she has actually lost you. And those are two very different things. A woman can lose access to you and still believe she has power over you. She can stop talking to you and still expect you to come back. She can reject you and still believe that somewhere inside you're waiting for her. But the moment she realizes that you are no longer emotionally available to her, something very interesting begins to happen. Because now she is no longer dealing with the man she thought she could predict. She's dealing with uncertainty, and uncertainty changes human behavior. This is one of the strange laws of human nature. We often don't fully appreciate what we have while it is available to us. The mind becomes accustomed to presence. Someone calls you every day, you answer. Someone needs your attention, you give it. Someone disappears and then comes back, you forgive them. Someone treats you badly and you remain available. Eventually, your availability stops feeling like a gift. It starts feeling like a guarantee. And the moment someone believes that you are guaranteed, they stop experiencing the possibility of losing you. That's where many people make their biggest mistake. They think that if they love harder, explain themselves better, prove their loyalty, send another message, or show more patience, the other person will finally understand their value. But human beings don't always respond to abundance with appreciation. Sometimes abundance creates indifference. And this is especially important in relationships because attraction is not built only on what someone feels when they are with you. It is also influenced by what they feel when you're not there. Your absence creates a space, and the mind hates empty spaces. It begins filling them with questions. Where is he? Why hasn't he called? Why doesn't he care anymore? Has he moved on? Is there someone else? Was I wrong about how much he wanted me? And notice what has happened. You haven't necessarily done anything. You haven't begged. You haven't threatened. You haven't tried to make her jealous. You simply stopped participating in a dynamic that was costing you your self-respect. And suddenly, her perception of you begins to change. This is not because women are somehow mysterious creatures. It's because this is human psychology. We tend to value things differently when their availability becomes uncertain. Think about the person you were completely sure would always be there. You probably didn't think about losing them very much. Now imagine receiving a message that says, essentially, I'm moving on. Suddenly, memories become more vivid. The good moments become more important. The small things you once ignored begin to feel significant. You start replaying conversations. You start wondering whether you made a mistake, and this is where something very powerful happens. The person who was previously evaluating you may suddenly begin evaluating herself. Did I push him too far? Did I take him for granted? Did I misunderstand his feelings? Could I actually lose him? That last question is the important one, because as long as she believes you are emotionally trapped, there is no urgency. But when she realizes you can genuinely walk away, the entire psychological equation changes. Now, understand something. This does not mean you should pretend not to care. It does not mean you should disappear for 3 days just to manipulate someone. It does not mean you should post pictures with another woman hoping she sees them. And it certainly doesn't mean you should become cold and cruel. Those are childish attempts at creating power. Real power is much quieter. Real power is being able to say, I care about you, but I will not abandon myself to keep you. That distinction changes everything because the most attractive form of distance isn't punishment, it's independence. You are not withdrawing because you want her to suffer. You are withdrawing because you have finally accepted reality. If she doesn't want the relationship, you don't force it. If she doesn't respect you, you don't negotiate for respect. If she repeatedly walks away, you don't spend your life standing at the door waiting for her to return. You let her go. And sometimes letting someone go is the first time they truly understand what they had. There's a psychological reason for this. When someone knows they can have you whenever they want, they don't have to confront the consequences of losing you. They can delay. They can become careless. They can test your boundaries. They can give you just enough attention to keep you around. and you may interpret every small signal as hope. A message at midnight, I miss you. A reaction to your story, a sudden question about your life, a memory from the past, and you think, maybe she wants me back? But be careful. Someone missing your presence is not necessarily the same as someone being ready to value your presence. That's a distinction that can save you years, because people can miss access to you without missing the responsibility of loving you. They can miss your attention. They can miss your validation. They can miss knowing that somebody is there whenever they feel lonely. But that doesn't automatically mean they are ready to give you what you need. So when someone comes back, don't listen only to what they say. Watch what they consistently do. Words are cheap because words don't cost much. Behavior costs something. Consistency costs something. Accountability costs something. Change costs something. If she tells you she misses you, that's information. If she changes the behavior that caused you to leave, that's evidence. And you should learn to distinguish between the two. Because one of the greatest mistakes people make after a breakup is confusing emotional intensity with genuine transformation. Someone can become extremely emotional when they realize they are losing you. That doesn't necessarily mean they have changed. Sometimes they simply don't like losing control of the situation. And this is where you have to understand your own psychology. Why did you become so available in the first place? Why did you tolerate disrespect? Why did you keep explaining yourself? Why did you chase someone who had already shown you that they weren't choosing you? The answer is often uncomfortable. You weren't afraid of losing her. You were afraid of what losing her would mean about you. You were afraid that if she left, you weren't good enough. So you tried to win her back. You tried to prove your worth. You tried to become more attractive, more successful, more romantic, more understanding, more available. But the deeper problem was that you were asking another person to confirm your value. And once you do that, you have handed them enormous psychological power. Because now your emotional state depends on their behavior. If she texts, you feel powerful. If she doesn't, you feel worthless. If she says she misses you, you're happy. If she becomes distant, you panic. You are no longer living according to your own standards. You are reacting to hers. And this is exactly how people lose themselves in relationships. They stop asking, is this person right for me? And start asking, how do I make this person choose me? Those are completely different questions. The first question comes from self-respect. The second comes from fear. And fear makes people do strange things. It makes intelligent people chase. It makes confident people beg. It makes successful people tolerate behavior they would never accept anywhere else. Because when you are emotionally attached, your perception becomes distorted. You stop seeing the person as they are. You see the person as you hope they will become, and you build an entire future around that fantasy. That's why letting go can feel so painful. You're not only losing a person, you're losing the future you imagined with them. But there is another side to this. When you finally let go of the fantasy, you become capable of seeing reality, and reality can be liberating. Maybe she comes back. Maybe she doesn't. But now your life doesn't depend on either outcome. That's the point. The goal isn't to make her regret losing you. The goal is to become the kind of person who doesn't need someone else to regret losing you. That is a much higher form of power, because if your entire purpose for improving yourself is so that an ex will look at you and think, I made a mistake, then you are still psychologically connected to her. You're still performing for her. You're still trying to control her perception. You haven't really moved on. You've simply changed the strategy. Real detachment is different. You improve because you have a life to build. You become stronger because weakness was costing you opportunities. You become disciplined because your future requires it. You become socially intelligent because understanding people gives you freedom. You become emotionally stable because you refuse to let another person's attention determine your worth. And ironically, that is often when people become more attractive, because desperation has disappeared. There is a difference between wanting someone and needing them. Wanting says, I would love to have you in my life. Needing says, I cannot feel whole without you. The first creates attraction. The second creates pressure. And people can feel that pressure. They can sense when you're trying too hard. They can sense when every conversation has an agenda. They can sense when your kindness isn't really kindness, but an investment you're expecting them to repay. This is why you should never use generosity as a hidden contract. Don't give someone attention while secretly thinking, now you owe me love. Don't be patient while secretly thinking, eventually she'll realize how amazing I am, but don't become the perfect partner, hoping that perfection will force someone to choose you. Love doesn't work that way. You cannot negotiate someone into desire. You can only control the quality of what you bring and the standards you maintain. And sometimes maintaining those standards means walking away. Now, here's the part most people don't understand. When a woman realizes she has truly lost you, she may not immediately come running back. Sometimes the first response is silence. Sometimes it's curiosity. Sometimes she watches from a distance. Sometimes she tests the door, a casual message, a simple, how have you been? A random memory, a question that doesn't seem important. And sometimes she does nothing at all, but don't make the mistake of sitting around analyzing every signal. That puts you right back into the same psychological trap. You're still waiting for her reaction. Instead, look at the larger principle. When you stop chasing, you create information, you finally discover what the other person actually wants. To If you stop doing all the emotional labor and the relationship disappears completely, then you have learned something. If you stop chasing and she genuinely steps forward with consistency, accountability, and effort, you have learned something else. Either way, you win because reality has become clearer, and clarity is power. This is why you should never fear walking away from something that is destroying your peace. People often stay because they think walking away means losing. But sometimes walking away is how you stop losing. You stop losing your time. You stop losing your confidence. You stop losing your attention. You stop losing your identity. You stop negotiating with someone who has already made their decision. And perhaps most importantly, you stop teaching another person that they can hurt you without consequences. Not consequences in the sense of revenge, consequences in the sense of access. If someone repeatedly treats you as an option, you don't need to punish them. You simply stop offering yourself as an option. That's it. No dramatic speech. No angry final message. No attempt to destroy their reputation. No performance. You just change your behavior, because behavior is where boundaries become real. And this brings us to one of the deepest lessons about attraction. People are drawn toward people who possess an independent center of gravity, someone who has their own purpose, their own standards, their own interests, their own direction, someone who can love deeply without becoming psychologically dependent. That person can walk away, and paradoxically, the ability to walk away is what makes staying meaningful. Because if you cannot leave, your staying has no power. You're not choosing the relationship. You're trapped inside it, but when you can leave and consciously choose to stay, your presence means something. It's a choice, not a dependency. And that's the kind of relationship you should want. Not one where you're constantly trying to convince someone to love you. Not one where you're afraid that setting a boundary will make them disappear. Not one where you have to become smaller to keep someone interested. You want a relationship where two people choose each other freely. And if someone walks away from that, let them. Don't chase them down the road. Don't try to convince them. Don't spend months trying to decode their behavior. Let reality speak. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can communicate is not another sentence. It's your absence. Not an absence designed to manipulate, an absence created by self-respect. And if she comes back, don't ask yourself only, does she still want me? Ask a much more important question. Has anything actually changed? Because being wanted is not enough. You need to be valued. You need to be respected. You need reciprocity. You need consistency. And you need a relationship where you don't have to constantly threaten to leave just to receive basic consideration. The greatest mistake after losing someone is trying to make them feel your absence. The greater achievement is building a life so meaningful that their absence no longer controls your emotional world. And that's when something strange happens. You stop asking whether she has lost you, because you finally realize that the real person you were afraid of losing was yourself. And once you stop losing yourself for someone else, you become much harder to manipulate, much harder to control, and much harder to take for granted. You become free, and freedom is far more powerful than being missed. But there is another layer to this that most people completely miss. When someone realizes they are losing access to you, the first thing that changes is often not their behavior. It is their perception. They begin seeing you differently because the psychological position has changed. Before you were familiar, predictable, available. They knew where you were. They knew how you would respond. They knew that if they pulled away, you would eventually come closer. That certainty creates comfort. But comfort and attraction are not always the same thing. Sometimes certainty becomes invisible. You don't notice what is always there. And this is true far beyond romantic relationships. Think about a person who has always been available whenever you needed them. You don't wake up every morning thinking about how rare their presence is. You simply assume they will be there. Then one day they aren't. Suddenly, their absence has a psychological weight that their presence never seemed to have. You begin noticing the empty space. And the mind starts doing what it always does with uncertainty. It searches for an explanation. Maybe he has changed. Maybe he met someone. Maybe he doesn't care anymore. Maybe I pushed him too far. Maybe I misunderstood how much control I actually had. And notice the shift. Before she was asking, how much does he want me? Now she may be asking, how much did I matter to him? That's a completely different psychological position. But there is something you must understand. You cannot manufacture this shift through cheap tricks. If you suddenly disappear while secretly checking whether she viewed your story, you haven't become detached. You're still emotionally dependent. You're simply hiding your dependence behind silence. Real absence comes from a change inside you. You stop asking, how can I get her back? And start asking, why did I accept so little in the first place? That question is far more uncomfortable because now the investigation isn't about her, it's about you. Why did you tolerate the mixed signals? Why did you keep returning after being disrespected? Why did you convince yourself that inconsistency was passion? Why did you mistake anxiety for attraction? Why did you think that if you could just find the right words, everything would suddenly become different? This is where human nature becomes interesting. We often protect the fantasy because the truth hurts. It's easier to say, she is confused, than to say, she doesn't want what I want. It's easier to say, she secretly loves me, than to say, her actions aren't showing me enough. It's easier to say, she is testing me, than to say, I'm afraid to accept that this relationship may be over. The ego prefers complicated explanations because complicated explanations allow hope to survive, but reality is often much simpler. Watch behavior, watch consistency, watch what happens when there is no pressure, watch what happens when you stop chasing. That will tell you more than 100 conversations, and this is why one of the strongest things a man can develop is emotional discipline, not emotional suppression, discipline. You can feel everything without obeying everything. You can miss someone without contacting them. You can love someone without chasing them. You can be hurt without becoming bitter. You can want someone back without abandoning your standards. That is emotional strength because weakness isn't feeling deeply. Weakness is allowing every feeling to dictate your behavior. You feel lonely, so you call. You feel rejected, so you beg. You feel jealous, so you investigate. You feel afraid, so you chase. You feel uncertain, so you demand reassurance. And every time you do that, you teach your mind, when I feel uncomfortable, I must immediately act. But sometimes the most important thing you can do is nothing. Sit with the feeling. Let it pass through you. Observe it. Ask where it came from. Because an emotion is information. It isn't always an instruction. And this is where many people lose their power after a breakup. They treat their emotions as commands. I miss her, therefore I should contact her. No, you miss her. That's all you know. I feel like she is the one, therefore I should chase her. No, you feel strongly about her. That is information. It isn't proof. Your emotional state can be real while your interpretation of it is completely wrong. This is why stepping away creates clarity. Distance gives the mind enough room to separate desire from reality. And sometimes, after enough distance, you realize something surprising. You weren't actually missing the person. You were missing the feeling, the attention, the validation, the routine, the possibility, the version of yourself that existed when she wanted you. And once you understand that, the attachment begins to weaken. But let's imagine she does come back. This is where you have to be especially careful because the return itself can feel like a victory. You spent weeks wondering whether she cared. Then suddenly she appears. Hey, how have you been? I was thinking about you. I miss what we had. And your entire nervous system lights up. You think she finally realized, but slow down. What exactly did she realize? Did she realize your value? Or did she simply realize your absence? Those are not necessarily the same thing. Someone can miss you and still be incapable of giving you a healthy relationship. Someone can want you back and still repeat the same behavior that made you leave. Someone can become jealous when you move on without actually wanting to build something stable with you. So don't measure change by emotion, measure it by behavior. If she says she wants another chance, ask yourself, is she taking responsibility? Is she consistent? Is she communicating differently? Is she respecting your boundaries? Is she willing to rebuild trust? Is she showing effort when there is no immediate reward? Because real change survives after the emotional moment disappears. Anyone can make promises when they are afraid of losing someone. The question is what happens 3 months later,
Yeah.
6 months later,
Sure.
when things become ordinary again. That's where character reveals itself. And this is another law of human nature. People often change temporarily when they fear consequences, but lasting transformation requires something deeper. It requires a change in identity. If she only changes because she is afraid you'll leave, the old behavior may return the moment she feels secure again. So don't fall in love with promises. Pay attention to patterns. Patterns are the truth. A single beautiful conversation means very little. A consistent pattern over time means everything. And the same principle applies to you. Don't promise yourself that you'll become stronger. Become stronger. Don't tell yourself you'll stop chasing. Stop chasing. Don't tell yourself you'll have boundaries. Enforce them. Because your mind doesn't believe what you say, it believes what you repeatedly do. And when you repeatedly act according to your standards, something changes inside you. You begin trusting yourself. That's the real goal, not getting her to regret losing you, trusting yourself enough to know that if someone walks away, you will survive, you will rebuild, you will continue, you will not collapse. And once you know that, relationships become much healthier because you're no longer entering them with the hidden fear, please don't leave me. You're entering with, I want you here, but I will be okay without you. That creates a completely different energy. You're more honest. You can say no. You can disagree. You can express what you want. You can leave when something violates your values. And paradoxically, you become easier to love because you're no longer demanding that someone constantly manage your emotional state. You're responsible for your own center. Now think about what happens when a woman realizes that. She realizes that your attention is no longer something she can summon whenever she wants. Your emotions are no longer under her control. Your schedule doesn't revolve around her. Your identity doesn't depend on her approval. And suddenly she has to meet you as an equal. That can be uncomfortable because some relationships are built around an imbalance. One person chases, the other person decides. One person seeks reassurance, the other person gives or withholds it. One person fears losing, the other person enjoys being pursued. When you stop playing your role, the entire relationship structure changes. And that's why sometimes the person who leaves isn't the person who has the most power. The person who can accept the outcome has more power because acceptance removes fear, and fear is what makes people controllable. If you are terrified that someone will leave, they don't even have to threaten you. You will control yourself for them. You'll silence your opinions. You'll tolerate disrespect. You'll over-explain. You'll become whatever you think they want. And slowly you disappear. This is why losing someone can sometimes be the beginning of finding yourself. The relationship ends. The fantasy ends. The constant emotional stimulation ends. And suddenly there is silence. At first, that silence feels empty. Then you begin hearing yourself again. You remember what you wanted before the relationship. You remember your ambitions, your friends, your work, your curiosity, your health, your identity. You start building again. And eventually you realize that the person you thought you couldn't live without was never the source of your life. They were part of it. That's an important distinction. A relationship should add to your life. It shouldn't become the entire structure holding your life up. Because when one person becomes your entire emotional world, losing them feels like losing everything. But when your life has depth, losing a relationship hurts without destroying you. And that is the kind of strength you want, not the strength of pretending you don't care, the strength of caring without becoming dependent. There's a huge difference. Coldness is easy. Anyone can become bitter. Anyone can say, I don't need women. I don't trust anyone. Love is fake. That's not strength. That's often pain wearing armor. Real strength says, I still believe in love. I still want connection. I still want intimacy. But I will not sacrifice my dignity to get it. That is much harder because it requires openness and boundaries at the same time. You remain capable of love without becoming blind. You remain generous without becoming desperate. You remain vulnerable without becoming dependent, and you remain willing to walk away when reality demands it. That is maturity. So if someone realizes they have lost you, let them experience that reality. Don't rush in to rescue them from it. Don't immediately explain yourself. Don't try to make sure they understand why you left. Don't give them a 10-paragraph message explaining every emotion you've ever felt. Sometimes explanation is another form of chasing. You don't need everyone to understand your decision. You need to understand it yourself. And if she reaches out, you don't have to punish her. You don't have to act cold. You don't have to prove that you are stronger. You can simply be calm, listen, observe, and ask yourself, is this person offering me something healthier than what I walked away from? If the answer is yes, you can consider it. If the answer is no, you can walk away peacefully. No revenge, no drama, no performance, because the strongest ending isn't, now she will regret losing me. It's, I no longer need her regret. That's when the relationship stops controlling you. That's when the past loses its grip. And that's when you understand something most people learn far too late. You cannot control whether someone recognizes your value. You can only control whether you recognize your own. And once you do, you stop begging people to see what they are determined to overlook. You stop chasing people who are comfortable losing you. You stop confusing attention with love. You stop confusing chemistry with compatibility. You stop confusing jealousy with commitment. And you stop confusing someone's return with someone's transformation. You become much more observant. You watch, you listen, you let time reveal character. And perhaps that is the deepest lesson. You don't need to make someone afraid of losing you. You need to become unwilling to lose yourself, because when you have yourself, rejection becomes information, distance becomes clarity, breakups become lessons. And someone's decision to leave no longer determines your value. You can miss them, you can love them, you can remember them, and still walk forward. That is freedom. And when you reach that point, whether she comes back or never comes back becomes almost secondary, because you've already recovered the one thing that mattered most, yourself.